What's going on, everyone? Today's video is going to be all about stabilizers. And every now and again I get this thing in my head where it's like I just have to explain this because I see it on the internet, I hear about it, I see comments and stuff, and I just have to talk about it. And again, like I always say in my videos, this is 100% opinion, but it's opinion based on just like so far me shooting in my lifetime, talking to a lot of like high level people on these topics, understanding it, regurgitating it, and kind of filtering it into my own opinion. This isn't just like some BS that I just am sitting in my basement thinking that this is the right way. The most important thing I think is to think about stabilizers is you should think about it from like a tournament rig style. So tournament rigs, for all the bow hunters out there thinking that why would you ever put like a 30-inch rod, a long 12-inch rod in the back, and it is to increase your steadiness and your forgiveness of the shot. Now, what a stabilizer does not do is it does not fix form, it does not fix your overall shot. Like, it doesn't make you shoot better. It can hide some boo-boos, but it can also enhance your form. If you already have really good form, what stabilizers do is it just enhances your shot. So I'm just gonna go through my setup first, just what I have. I've always really ran a 30-inch front bar. That's pretty standard for people shooting in the competition world. And then I run a 12-inch. So what's really popular is a 12-inch or a 15-inch out the back. I've always really done a 12, 15-inch, just it's almost unnecessary because I can put a little bit of extra weight and do the same thing that a 15-inch rod would do. Things to look for in a good quality stabilizer is it's really important that it is stiff. The whole point of a stabilizer is to like diffuse vibration and to stabilize the shot. And to do the best job at stabilizing the shot is to have a really stiff rod that is super light. The lighter, the better, because that pretty much allows you to focus all of the weight at the end of it rather than to have weight throughout the entire thing. So you would think that maybe weight throughout the entire thing would help reduce vibration, but there's like a fine line of, you know, if you had this thing stacked up with a bunch of like shock pods like this or whatever, but it made it heavy all the way through, it eliminates kind of like what a stabilizer does, which is puts weight as far away from the bow as possible to help stabilize it. In addition, I have a 8-degree quick disconnect down, which like an 8-degree down or the rod sticking straight out are kind of just personal preference. It does have a slightly different feel to it, and I think that it brings the center of gravity a little bit lower because this bar is lower than what it would be like up here. So I don't know, it just kind of sits a little bit better for me, but that is 100% a personal preference thing and just really almost a per bow and per person situation. So that is my target rig, and pretty much my hunting rig is a dumbed down version of the target setup, because obviously you can't have 30-inch rods. You can't, you know, walk around the woods, go up in a tree stand with it. So what I choose on my hunting stabilizers are a 12-inch in the front, and depending on what I'm doing and shooting, but this is a 9-inch, or I'll have a 12-inch out the back. I kind of swapped them back and forth. And what a 12-inch would do is would allow me to run less weight to get the same feel, but it's a little longer and does get in the way a little bit. So I'm gonna be talking about my hunting rig pretty much the rest of the time because I feel like that is where the most confusion comes from. I feel like if you're a target archer and you've been around like a good support system of coaches and stuff, you kind of realize what stabilizers are for. But it seems like with the ever-changing market of the hunting space and kind of this prosumer level of hunters, there's a lot of confusion that comes around stabilizers. So I guess first, I'm gonna bust some myths, I suppose. And again, take this with a grain of salt because everyone's a little different and every feel is a little bit different. This is just, like I said, my opinion based on my experiences. I'm sure you guys have seen it, but there's these machines that you can put your bow in and then you can tweak your stabilizers to get it perfectly balanced, like 100% perfectly balanced, boom, perfectly balanced. Now that it may feel really good when you're shooting, like it feels balanced, it feels steady, But what that does is it allows bias from all directions. Left bias, right bias, even, you know, forward and backward bias. It doesn't have any bias to it. Essentially, you're not using any force, you're not using any muscle to keep the bow balanced. Another myth, this is kind of a myth. Let me grab a stabilizer. A quiver. If you have a quiver on the side of your bow, you now just added a bunch of weight on the side of your bow. Luckily, with the new Matthews Low Pro quiver, it is tighter and you don't experience it as much. But overall, when you add a quiver to the side of your bow, it adds weight on the right. So naturally, people think that, hey, let me add this side stabilizer on the opposite side to help counterbalance it. Yes, that is true. That does help counterbalance it, but it still doesn't achieve the ultimate purpose of the side stabilizer. So I'm going to talk about all of this as if the quiver was off, because I really don't shoot my quiver on unless I have to, because if you switch this weight on and off all the time, your stabilizer setup, potentially other things could be different. So I guess what I would say is set your bow up how you're gonna shoot it and always shoot like that. If you're always gonna shoot with your quiver on, always set up, always tune with your quiver on. If you're gonna shoot with your quiver off, always tune, always shoot with your quiver off. It's never like a back and forth thing, because it could potentially cause some variation. So the back bar pretty much has two purposes, arguably three, but we'll stick with two. It offsets the weight of the front bar. By adding weight in the back, it can help balance it. And then secondly, it creates bias. It creates bias by having weight thrown out to the side. So there is an equation, this is a George Riles equation for you have stabilizers or you're thinking about what type of stabilizers to get. It's a simple equation so you can figure out what weight to start at. Obviously, there's some customizability to that. So to calculate the correct weight for your stabilizers so that they can balance each other out, it's the length of your front rod times the weight on that front rod divided by the back bar length gives you the total amount of weight to put onto your back bar. So for example, if we have a 12-inch front rod, and let's just use my example, I have 2 ounces in the front. So that gives us 24 divided by the back bar length. I have 9 on right now, a 9-inch. So divided by 9. So it says I should only need 2.6 ounces in order for the bow to be balanced. Now, if you mix that up, let's say we have a 12-inch front bar with 6 ounces in the front, and then we only have a 7-inch back bar. So divided by 7. So you would need 10 ounces in the back. So it's all just math. Kinda. But now let's talk about some target setup. So let's say we have a 30-inch bar in the front and we only have 6 ounces on that front bar. So that gives us 180 divided by, let's say we had a 12-inch back bar. So you need a good 15 ounces in the back to counterweight just 6 ounces in the front. Granted, this is all just a starting point and personal preference is gonna play in a little bit, but this gives you a good starting point on how your weights roughly should be oriented. So talking about the back bar bias, the BBB, back bar bias, is how it sticks out on the side with weight. And pretty much what that does is it forces you to apply some muscle, to use some of your arm muscles, yes, to have the bow stay balanced. And this is where your second axis is super important, because if your second axis bubble is off, then none of this even works. But that creates bias, and essentially that eliminates 50% of your issues. Because if you're always applying pressure from the left, let's say, to make sure your bubble is in line, you're not as vulnerable to experience left and right aiming and balance issues if your bow is at neutral, is at the balance point. So this is a big reason why we actually did develop on the B-Real grip this high shelf, because on the Matthews Vantage grip, it just doesn't allow you to really get your finger and be able to use this bias without having some inconsistencies. So if you guys follow along and watch me shoot, my finger's always up on there, which makes me bring my bow into balance, creates that bias, and helps me just be less vulnerable by left or rights. So this is some George Ryle's teachings that I'm talking about, and he actually put together a really good video on all of this, and especially more on the target side of things. So I'll put that right here for you guys to watch. Now, it's also really important that you don't get too caught up in this stuff. I feel like people really get caught up in stabilizers and weight setups and everything. It's kind of like you set it right the first time, and then there's really never major changes, like maybe an ounce tweak here and there, a couple ounces. Especially in a hunting setup, you just kind of set it up and forget it. I always just throw on, literally I have 4 and 2. So according to the formula, it is 1.5 more ounces than it's supposed to, but it feels good. And maybe that's just because my sight's out a little further. I don't know. It's all about feel, but the important part is to understand what stabilizers do. Stabilizers do not fix form problems. They only make them worse. So the best thing to do is, if you're ever changing form, if you're trying out a new release, if you're trying out a new bow, anything major form related, go as light as you possibly can on your stabilizers, or take all of the weight off of your stabilizers. There's no need to be worrying about like stabilizer weight and balance when you figure that stuff out. Whenever I took a break from target archery or anything and I get back into shooting my tournament bow, I always nearly strip all the weight off, because I just need some time to really just focus on my form and not having to worry about the fatigue of the weights or the balance of the bow 100%. I can just worry about my form. One other little myth-ish that I guess I should talk about is like post-shot, what the bow does in the post-shot. I've seen people worried about like the bow kicks this way, the bow kicks that way. Well, the bow shouldn't be doing any of those things if you kind of set it up correctly in the first place. And there's, like I said, more major form issues if those things are happening that can't be fixed by weight. Like, you should be able to pick up a bare bow. Like, I could take stabilizers off right now and still shoot really good. Like, stabilizers don't fix anything. They just enhance the form that you have. So thank you guys for watching today's video on stabilizers, kind of the methodology of them and how to use them correctly, I suppose. If you're interested in the stabilizers that I use, these are the Shrewd Vantage B-Reel series. You can pick these up actually on breelmerch.com, the hunting series stabilizers. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll catch you in the next one.